and welcome to Ethics Today, where we talk law and ethics. My name's Tony, I'm going to be your host today, and here are our lovely panel who's going to help us through the show. I'll go ahead and introduce them.
Hi, my name's Paula.
My name is Rosie.
I'm Edith.
And I'm Tanya.
So here we go. So today we're going to talk about a case that went to court in Johnson County. The headlines read, Johnson County jury awards $2.88 million in malpractice case against the pain clinic. I'll give you a quick synopsis of the case that went about what happened. So we'll call the patient Mr. B. He has a history of chronic lower back pain and went to a pain clinic called Pain Care. The doctors there are both board certified in anesthesia and pain management. Dr. Burning initially injected medication into his back to alleviate his back pain. But about 6 months later, Mr. B went back to Pain Care for another round of pain medication injections. Unfortunately, Dr. Burnings, the initial doctor seeing him, was on vacation, so Dr. Eubanks attended his treatment. The site where the previous injection was placed was red and had a lump, but Dr. Eubanks continued to giving the injection through that site. A short time after he leaves the clinic, Mr. B is immobilized on his couch with his back and legs aching and a stiff neck, with a head on fire with pain. He thought he had a bad case of the flu, but his girlfriend decides to call the nurse helpline, which had told him that he actually had signs and symptoms of meningitis. Mr. B was brought to the hospital and diagnosed with meningitis caused by an MRSA bacteria. He was given a poor prognosis of death or paralyzed. But after 10 days, he was able to pull through, but the infection left him with overwhelming spinal injuries. The damaged and chronically inflamed spinal cords left him impotent and without control of bowel or bladder. He had trouble walking and was in a constant state of pain. Mr. B filed a lawsuit against Pain Care, but before his case was heard, Mr. B unfortunately committed suicide. So Mr. B's parents are actually the ones filing the lawsuit against Pain Care for a wrongful death suit. His parents believe that the suffering caused by Pain Care and the pain that he endured caused him to take his own life. So let's go to the panel and talk about the ethical issues and dilemmas regarding this.
The nurse taking care of Mr. B is at the Pain Care clinic did not follow the standard of her profession. To better understand what is missing in this situation, let me explain how nurses guide their practice. The American Nurses Association developed the Code of Ethics, which sets the standards of ethical conduct for nurses. The Code of Ethics guides the nurses carrying out nursing obligations and responsibilities in a manner consistent with the quality of care. The Code of Ethics sets up some provisions to guide the care. The first provision refers to the respect of human dignity and the human rights, regardless of social status or the nature of the health programs. The nurse has the primary commitment for his patients. It can be individuals, family, or community. The nurse promotes, advocates, and strives to protect the patient's rights, health, and safety. Mr. B nurse should have advocate and protect his safety by asking Dr. Eubanks to assess and treat the lump that she noticed before he was able to give any injection. The nurse has the authority, accountability, and responsibility for nursing practice to make it. She has the accountability and she can make decisions and take actions consistent with the obligations to provide optimal care. Here, the nurse is accountable for the lack of commitment to Mr. B. She only focuses on ignoring if the doctor was taking care of Mrs. B's lump.
In Mr. B's deposition, he told the nurse about the lump. She took a look at the lump and she needed a few minutes. She stepped away. She talked to the doctor. She came back and she told him it was okay. In the Nurse Practice Acts of Kansas Board of Nursing, the standards of practice, each registered professional nurse shall be familiar with each Kansas Nurse Practice Acts. Standards of practice of the profession of the Code of Ethics for professional nurses. The practice of nursing, the practice of professional nursing as performed as a registered nurse, amends to the process in which substantial specialized knowledge derived from biological, physical, and behavior scenes applied to the care, diagnosis, treatment, counsel, health teachings of persons involved with normal health processes, and maintenance of health to prevent injury or illness within supervision and teaching of the process defined in this section. Unprofessional conduct, any of the following shall constitute unprofessional conduct. Failing to take appropriate action or to follow policies and procedures in this situation designed to save care of the patient. And in this case, the nurse did not follow the Nurse Practice Act and the Standards of Care of Kansas because she was aware of the lump, but she did nothing to advocate for the patient and speak on his behalf.
Okay, so again, my name is Tanya. I'm going to be talking about the judicial process and the healthcare laws. So the incident happened in the state of Kansas. So in the state of Kansas, the Kansas wrongful death statute can be found in KSA 60-1901, and pursuant to that act, the death of a person is caused by the wrongful act or omission of another. An action may be maintained for the damages if the former might have maintained the action had he or she lived in accordance with the provisions of this article against the wrongdoer, or his or her personal representative if he or she is deceased. So the judicial process, to fully appreciate the various types and classifications of laws, substantive and procedural law, and the application of the specific procedures, and understanding of the court system is helpful. So facts are determined by evidence presented by both sides in a legal controversy. Questions of fact present the dispute that the jury answers. So facts are not necessarily what actually happened, because people on both sides will have perceived the given incident through their own eyes. Each party to the controversy brings unique perceptions to the trial setting. The fact finder has the responsibility to weigh admissible evidence as presented and to decide where the facts of the case really lie. Sometimes both sides in the controversy agree to certain facts prior to the trial. In these cases, the only questions to be resolved concern questions of law, which involve the application of interpretation of laws and are determined by the judge in the court. One other thing to note is that in the newspaper article, it said they were awarded, I believe, $2.8 million. But according to Kansas law, the court, they can only be given a maximum of $250,000 for damages. That's about it as far as judicial process and Kansas law.
We believe that it's first important for us to identify what that means exactly. Malpractice, sometimes referred to as professional negligence, is a more specific term that addresses a professional standard of care, as well as the professional status of the caregiver. To be liable for malpractice, the tortfeasor, or the person committing the civil wrong, must be a professional such as a physician, nurse, accountant, or a lawyer. Courts have continually defined malpractice as any professional misconduct, unreasonable lack of skill, or fidelity in professional or judiciary duties. Moreover, this wrong or injudicious treatment results in injury, unnecessary suffering, or death to the injured party, and proceeds from ignorance, carelessness, want of proper professional skill, disregard of established rules and principles, neglect, or a malicious or criminal intent. In a more modern definition, malpractice is the failure of a professional person to act in accordance with the prevailing professional standards or failure to foresee consequences that a professional person having the necessary skills and education should foresee. In the case of Mr. B, malpractice was cited, and the resulting disciplinary action cost the defendant $2.88 million to be awarded to his parents. In his case, the individuals involved were healthcare professionals, in particular the nurse and the doctor. Their actions and inactions, based on the prosecution, is what led Mr. B to his death. The attorney for the doctors and their clinic are going to try to get the verdict appealed based on the grounds that Mr. B already had psychiatric issues and that those issues are what led him to his death. Unfortunately for the nurse, she can also be tried separately on top of potentially having been already a part of the initial case.
So let's talk about documentation. In this particular case, documentation was a huge key point they made in court. One of the doctors treating Mr. B had actually said he had no recollection of the patient and his treatment, except for what he had actually written in the medical records, which actually has no notes regarding the swelling on the patient's back, which it appears the nurse who Mr. B notified of the lump saw it, reported it to the doctor, and came back to tell Mr. B that the doctor said it was no problem. Unfortunately, there was no documentation of the exchange that was occurred between Mr. B and the nurse, and the one between the nurse and the doctor. The documentation and the reports do show that they contend that the first injection caused the infection and the second injection months later passed the infection area and contaminated the patient's spinal cord. The documentation for the second procedure said it only took 3 minutes to perform the whole procedure. How careful can they possibly be? His lawyers did argue in court. Documenting everything that was seen and that was done to prevent infection needs to be done to protect the practice, the healthcare provider, and the patient. That was a huge documentation fail that they didn't provide. So I definitely think documentation is a huge part of legal issues and legal cases. Hi guys, so here we are. I mean, let's see what the real ethical issue is. Like in this, after hearing the scenario, what everyone has to say, what do you think is the real deep main ethical issue?
Well, I think they already ran into a problem when documentation was a big issue here. Ethically, also there's the question of who's liable for this occurrence. Because of course we have the doctors, and they're saying, well, the patient already has some sort of psychiatric issue going on. But then again, they failed to address and even mention in the article that there was no mention of the lump being ever charted as being present on his back when he came back for that second visit. So, and then the nurse failed. Also, I think the nurse is in big trouble in this case too, because she did not have any sort of documentation proving that she had a conversation with the patient. It was actually in the deposition of Mr. B that they found that conversation, because that's what he claims that the nurse had said to him, that she had gone to go see the doctor, told the doctor about it. The doctor's like, hey, it's no problem. So the nurse is in big trouble, I think.
Along with the clinic, definitely.
And the doctor. I mean, how can any doctor in their right mind put a needle through a big lump?
Right, or anything that looks abnormal.
Right. And then he obviously got meningitis because of it. So, I mean, I think it all comes down to when you're in your professional practice, whatever you're doing, just slow down and focus on what you're doing and think about that person that you're caring for.
Right. I mean, how could they have, even if it was something that typically occurred, some sort of swelling, But they mentioned that the swelling, the size was like the size of a
small
small racquetball. I mean, that should have been somewhat alarming, right? That, I don't think that's a typical kind of swelling that
Right.
occurred, so that should have immediately alerted the doctor to do some more digging before actually. And I'm not the doctor, but I wouldn't want to puncture through something that's already, and then you're going into the
Exactly.
spine, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a recipe for disaster.
I think the nurse have to make sure the patient is safe. So she have to stop the doctor. Well, not stop the doctor, but ask him to assess better the lung. Not just go and start injecting the medication without checking. She failed to advocate for him. She did. I don't know if she really told the doctor about the lump that she found. She mentioned it that she did, but there's no proof that she really did. So I think there's a big issue too. She's liable for what's
Right,
going on.
and that's why, again, it goes back to documenting properly, because, she could have protected herself if she had actually just charted what she had seen, what she had told the doctor, what the doctor had told her. So I think in this case, unfortunately, it is some sort of malpractice, case, because they are professionals, held to a higher code of, conduct, and they did seem to, we do have, the protocols and policies and how, and you're taught in school, right? If it's not documented, it's not done.
Exactly.
So,
I believe they both knew, the nurse and the doctor, that they were at fault. I think that's why they didn't chart anything, they just wanted to share, not because they knew they could have had there was going to be a lawsuit against them.
There's definitely
Mhm.
signs of negligence. So, now that we've heard everything about, this scene and the ethics and the laws behind it, what do you guys believe is something to make this situation better, or to have made this situation not happen and prevent the death of this patient? Like, what do you think ethically, if you were the providers, you guys could have done to have prevented all of this?
For me, like the nurse, I'm a nurse, so of course, I would of course listen to the patient and advocate for him. Yeah, she went to tell the doctor, but she could have done more than that, or tell him go see a second opinion, have that lump treated. I think she could have went further and spoke for him and got him help. He was depressed, maybe to speak to someone else as well. I think just more could have been done for him.
Those are definitely some good points. Anybody else have any other, ways to kind of help improve the situation and kind of prevent the untimely death of this patient?
I just think, like Rosie said, sometimes patients just want to be heard and really listen to their not complaint, but listen to what they have to say and treat it seriously,
I think we should do our work. We should follow our protocols. We should follow the standards of our practice. That will prevent a lot of problems, a lot of deaths, and situations where we really don't want to go. As nurses, we don't want to go to get called for court just to testify, or we don't want to be involved in this situation. So just following protocols, providing the best of our practice, we can prevent all these situations.
Very true. And I believe because it was a clinic, I do think, like Rosie said, the nurse should advocate, like Tanya and Edith and Paula, we all agree that, there should have been protocols followed and that things shouldn't have been done. They actually probably should have sent him to the ER to get tests done on the skin area to prevent all this, because all they were was a pain clinic where, they have an anesthesiologist and they manage pain. Maybe, if they have something that's unfamiliar, they should have got it checked.
And
So,
again, going back to Tanya said, sometimes I think we also shouldn't forget that our patients
they would know their bodies more than we do. And, and I think, like Latanya said, taking claims seriously, no matter if to us, even if we think we already know what is going on and what it is that they're claiming or what they're trying to show us or symptoms that they're saying they have, even though we may think that it's not true, but, what if it is and there is something there? And unfortunately, in this case, there was something there. Where it was a valid claim, but he just wasn't heard. And again, like what everybody else has said, we're going back to being patient advocates.
So we got to wrap it up, and that's the end of our show. I want to thank, my lovely guest here helping me out on ethics today, and we're going to pull through. Almost done. And thank you.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you next time.
See you next class.